The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello, friends, and thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week, we're going to review the heartbreaking 2-1 loss in Vancouver. We'll also preview this week's trip to Houston to play the Dynamo again, and then we'll cover some other Austin FC news. My name's Landon Cottam, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey, everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley, and I am joined again by a Chris, but a different Chris than the last one. We're joined by the Striker's own Chris Bils. How you doing, Chris?
I'm great. Coming off of a great trip to BC for me, not so much for Austin FC, but you take what you can get, and I wasn't going to pass up a chance to take a little vacation time in one of my favorite slices of the world. So I had a great trip to Vancouver. I'm not sure that everybody else in Verde or from Austin did. So apologies for my jolly tone on this podcast, but I enjoyed the fresh air.
Well, we'll probably enjoy your company more than we would have if we had Josh Wolff or somebody else on. So I'm glad to have you here to lighten the mood.
The border agent I got coming back in claimed that he was there. I believe him because who else knows about Austin FC, but he was like they came through last night, and I tried to joke with him about Salt Lake, and I was like, why do you know Salt Lake? He's like, I'm from Corpus Christi, I went to UT. And he's like he's like, yeah, I tried to joke with him about Salt Lake, but the coach was like, they're not getting nothing. So I don't know if that was a true story or not, but I decided to go ahead and tweet it anyway. So.
All right. Well, you wrote a couple of really good articles since that game. And so we thought it'd be a good idea to have you on to kind of break down the game with us. Cause I think a lot of the stuff you wrote hit the nail on the head. And so, let's jump into it. So leading up to the game, we knew that the team traveled. They had training on Thursday morning and then traveled Thursday afternoon, and we're going to be in Vancouver Friday and Saturday. And so Thursday, I think it was Thursday evening, some people online are talking about, oh, Dani Pereira is streaming video games on Twitch right now. And it's like, oh, I guess he's not in Vancouver. And then come game time, lineup comes out and he's not even on the roster. So were you able to get any information on that, Chris?
I actually did not end up asking Josh Wolff in the post game. There was just so much that happened during the match, and we didn't get him for very long. So unfortunately, I don't have much insight into that. But I mean, as far as we know, he wasn't on the injury report, right? And from my vantage point, I guess maybe it won't satisfy everybody, but I do feel like it made sense. It made sense to me that if you're not going to start him, which I felt like in some sense was the right move, because he struggled last match. Like, let's be honest, he struggled against FC Dallas, and I think he struggled a bit in that number 6 role. And if you're going to take somebody out and put Pochettino in, I think it made sense to not start Dani Pereira. And let's think about how the season's gone for him, because he's, this is his first time in a professional setting, his first time playing a 9-month, 10-month season. And he's had injury problems. So it's the longest road trip of the season. They're playing on turf, some of the worst turf in the league, by the way, at BC Place. And if you're not going to start him, why are you going to fly him in for a 30-minute or a 10-minute performance? I mean, I guess we can sort of argue about whether he would have been useful in some of the moments that they had in Vancouver, but I think it did make sense to get him off his feet, let him play some video games, and come back into training fresh for Houston. That's just my take on things.
I agree with all of that. I think Wolff still would have liked to have had him available in case of emergency. My guess was that it was something to do with his visa.
That's an interesting thought. I would
imagine
considered that.
His visa status is different than a lot of these guys, because a lot of these guys, like the international ones who came straight to Austin from another country, they're coming here to work, essentially, like to do that job.
Right.
And so like their visa status would be tied around their job, whereas Dani Pereira already had some sort of visa status before then. And I think I read that he came as like like an asylum seeker essentially.
Yeah,
And so
yeah. No,
I was
that's
guessing maybe
100%
it had
true.
something to
I
do
think
with
that he's getting closer to getting American citizenship, but as far as we know, that hasn't happened yet. So that's pretty astute from you. That's why I listen to Moon Tower Soccer. So and that's why Moon Tower Soccer is part of the Striker. So I can say that. Oh yeah, the Striker said that. Yeah, that was us. Yeah.
So other stuff going on with the lineup. I think a lot of fans were kind of playing in their head with the idea of like, how do we get this set of players, like essentially our best attacking players, how do we get them on the field at the same time? Where should we play Alex Ring? Should we move him back to the 6? Should we play him at the 8? During all of this, I pretty much completely forgot that Diego Fagundes spent the first part of the season playing centrally. And it was just like in my head, like Diego Fagundes plays on the wing. That's where he plays. And so when the lineup came out, it's like, I don't think he even said it in the lineup because they didn't put it in order. But whenever they went onto the field, it became, I was kind of thinking that
that's the fun
Pochettino
part.
would be at the 8.
Honestly, I enjoy the lineup releases from Austin FC more than anything I do else I do in this job, because it's not very clear, right? It's I had a funny moment when I went to do the pregame show with Corey Basso, who does the play-by-play for radio up in Vancouver, invited me on to do their pregame show, and I think they were pretty assured that it was going to be a 4-1-4-1, and Opta had it as a 4-2-3-1, but not in the personnel that Josh ended up running out. So it was
with
like
Julio Cascante at the 10.
No, yeah, something like
Not
that.
that
Yeah. But it's like I kind of feel smart sometimes when really it's just I followed this team, every day in and day out. So it's kind of fun to have those moments when the lineup comes out and be like, no, this is actually what I think is going to happen. And usually we get close, but it's kind of fun to see the different concoctions that Josh can come up with.
I was guessing it was going to be Pochettino at the 8 and with Diego wide right.
Yep.
And then I think at the very start of it, maybe we didn't have the ball for very long. And the moment that I felt smart by noticing that wasn't happening, it wasn't when we had the ball, but it was in defense when Pochettino was out wide right on the wing.
Well, yeah, it was.
And I was like, that's always the spot that the winger defends in.
I think in defense and maybe even in the press, I thought it was more of almost a 4-4-2 because Driussi was going up with Cecilio, and then when they dropped in, it was more of a. Would you guys have it as a 4-2-3-1?
I would say 4-2-3-1. Yeah, with Diego dropping in beside Ring a lot of times in build up.
Yeah, no, and I thought it worked. Right, we can get into that a little bit. I thought it worked for the first 60 minutes.
Yeah, and talking about the defense there, like Josh Wolff had some comments last week talking about the press, and I watching the press in the last few games, especially against Dallas, it worked for a little bit, but after a bit, Dallas just started shredding our press apart, and we're passing right through it. And my observation was that the midfielders weren't getting to certain places on time to cut off stuff. Wolff made some comments in the press conference saying that there were times the forwards were going when they weren't supposed to be. And so I was kind of putting blame on the midfielders, and he was essentially saying like, well, no, I think maybe my guess is Cecilio just took off running and pressing when he wasn't necessarily supposed to, or was the wrong trigger. And so the midfielders were like, oh crap, I guess we have to go now too, and not getting there in time. But it seemed like in this game, they were sat back, like happy to sit back a little bit deeper and let Vancouver come to them as opposed to trying to press them really hard.
Yeah, and Jeremy, I don't know if you want to jump on the back of this, but I've been really impressed with Sebastian Driussi in the press and how hard he plays and how hard he works. And sometimes I feel like he's almost waving the guys with him, right? Like, we need to play this hard, and I think that's what you want from your star player, your DP, your high dollar, number 10 is that he's not only willing to make the money plays and score the goals like he did in this one, but he's willing to do the work. And I think that's going to pull up the rest of the group with him, but we haven't quite seen it yet, I guess.
Yeah, there's so much that goes into that. I felt like that a lot in the second half in Dallas, that him being all over the field backwards and forwards and sort of urging people on was one of the things that really helped him rally in a way, for sure.
And with him, it always seems like a controlled and intentional thing. With Cecilio works pretty hard, but it doesn't always seem like he knows exactly where he's going. I'm going to run really hard right now and try to get to this guy. Driussi, it seems very calculated. Almost every movement he makes, he knows exactly where he's going and what's going to happen when he gets there, which has been a lot of fun to watch. All right, let's jump into the game itself. So to start off, I think the whole first half, Austin looked in complete control of this game. They didn't get a goal until the 45th minute, right before the half, but I think it was 7 shots in the first half. I saw some places saying no shots for Vancouver in the first, and then some stats pages saying 1 shot in the first half. In any case, it wasn't much, and if whatever shot they did record was vague enough or on the line enough that some people didn't think it was a shot at all. I don't remember exactly what it was, but Austin was doing really well. They were getting pretty good chances in their possession, which I think has been one of the things that they haven't been able to do all season is turning possession into actual chances. And they were doing that in this game. Before we get to that goal, there was a couple of stupid little things that I noticed in the game. One of which was Diego Fagundes got that yellow card, and I think in like the 7th minute.
Yeah, early yellow card, and it was deserved too. I could hear the shin guard smack from where I was in the press box. So,
did you see the replay of the broadcast on that, Chris?
No, I didn't.
It was, I think maybe it was still deserved, but it was the turf's fault essentially.
Interesting. Okay.
Diego puts the brakes on essentially, and you can see in the broadcast his feet just slide across the turf and he just smashes into him. So it was a really hard tackle, and like maybe you could still say it was reckless or whatever, but Diego did not mean to hit that guy. So I think the turf caused a lot of,
I guess what I should say is that I felt like I was covering a high school football game because I could hear the pads. I could hear the pads from the press box, and I haven't had that sensation in a while. Certainly not in Q2.
The other funny thing I noticed watching the broadcast back was Adrian Healy was talking about the last game, and he said that Dirk Nowitzki scored a goal against us last game. He was talking about Jake Nerwinski.
That's amazing.
Okay, let's jump to that goal though. So Sebastian Driussi scores a header in the 45th minute right before the half. So it was a corner kick, gets recycled back out. Pochettino ends up with the ball, pushing up the right-hand side. He pokes the ball past the defender, runs around the other side. Picks up the ball again, plays the ball into the box to Cecilio. Cecilio faces up the defender, chips across in, and finds Driussi's head, and he finishes it really well. So talking about Pochettino's positioning, I feel like he looks really good on that right wing. And there's a few things I wasn't sure he would be good at or be willing to do, and he kind of did all of them.
Yeah, I think that he's motivated right now after not starting the past 2 matches, which is something that we talked with Josh Wolff about midweek. And yeah, I think that the message was sent, and then I think that Tomas Pochettino played hard on the right wing last week in the last 45 and earned the start this week. And I wasn't so sure. I kind of thought the same thing as you, that it was that he was going to fit in next to Driussi, and that's kind of where I've thought all along he would look the best. But he looks pretty at home on that right wing, and he does some things that, I still want to see him outside the box take a shot with his right foot, and I'm not sure those moments are really going to happen if he's out on the right wing, because obviously it's hard to end up with that moment where he can really cut in and have a shot at be on his left foot right from the wing. But his service was very good, and you saw it on this play, and his creativity, the thought to take that move. And he had a move early in the game too, where I think he took a nice little flick out of the air and moved it around somebody and beat a defender. And those are the kinds of things that Austin needs. I mean, if you think about positional play, one of the ways you beat players or beat teams is by, passing through lines and things. But the other way is just by having better players than the other team does. And Tomas Pochettino did that, I thought, for Austin FC from the right wing. So that's a positive sign. And also it got all three DPs closer to goal than we've seen them all season long. And I thought that paid dividends and maybe should have resulted in one or two more goals, especially in that first half when they really dominated, I thought. But, we'll see if getting Moussa Djitte a start and playing with those guys helps that, or if this is just, they still need to learn how to play together. But I thought this was the best we'd seen of the three DPs working off of each other and being in the right spots.
Yeah, Chris, I wanted to follow up on that because I think you wrote about that. I mean, in maybe it was one of the game reports about, this is basically the first time we'd seen the three DPs working together effectively. I mean, do you see that being like a long-term key to them moving forward? I feel like this is, every once in a while we get this like, oh, we did this thing really well for 45 minutes, so this is the thing that's going to connect and turn it all around, right? Like Alex Ring was an attack that one game and we're like, hell yeah, we're going to play Alex Ring forward and everything's going to be right with the world, right? And then that failed. And so I feel like, so do you think that's like a legitimate path forward, or is this sort of just another, like we're all searching for something to hang our hat on to find some positivity out of this season?
Yeah, we've had a lot of those brain blasts, haven't we? Is that from Jimmy Neutron? What was the show?
I think so. Yeah,
brain blast. Yeah, but we've had a lot of those moments where like, oh, this is the answer, and I don't know, but all I know is that I had a lot of really good like short conversations with Canadians, which is one of my favorite parts of being up in Canada. Is like I'm walking out of the press box and this guy chats me up. He's like, "Oh, are you from Texas?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then I'm like, "Where can I get some food?" And he like shows me the poutine stand, and we're talking, and he goes, "Yeah, you guys have had a rough go of it." And he's like asking me what the problems have been, and I'm asking him a little bit about why Mark Dos Santos got fired, and he's like, "Yeah, you just really need your DPs to perform, And I'm just like, yep, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the key to success in this league if you've got a decent roster built around them. And I was thinking of, I didn't get his name, but I was thinking of that guy the moment that goal went in. I was like, well, that's all three DPs, and they were all involved in that goal. So, shout out to the guy walking out of the press box randomly and showing me the poutine stand because, he provided a nice little anecdote for the game recap.
I didn't think I really put together that it was DP to DP to DP on that goal, but yeah, it's going back to what Jeremiah was saying though, that I think what went wrong in this, like with Ring playing him at the 8, it was still like what he was doing at the 8 was still good, but the problem was him not being at the 6.
Yep.
And so I think in this situation, like what those three DPs were doing in those spots weren't the reason we lost the game. And so I think that's at least something to take comfort in, that it is something that could still work going forward if we fix the other stuff going on around it. It's not like a double-edged sword that is going to help us and hurt us at the same time.
When no one is around.
Okay, we are going to interrupt ourselves very briefly to bring you a message from our friends at FVF Law. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by FVF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FVF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And so I've been following them on Instagram for a while, probably not as long as I should. And they also really seem to like each other because I see a lot of like congratulatory posts for employee of the month or like somebody's anniversary or something. So they seem like real good, nice people. And I feel like I know them all, even though we've only met them through Zoom.
Is it as fun as watching the Austin FC players tease each other on Instagram? Is it that kind of banter, or is it more wholesome than
it's just wholesome, positive, good, clean fun. Not quite like the Austin FC stuff.
Kakuta Mane and Jared Stroud just being straight up mean to each other.
yeah, not like that at all.
You can go to fvf.law to find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's fvf.law. Let's talk about hot sauce, Jeremiah.
Let's talk about hot sauce. And when we talk about hot sauce, we have to talk about Teardrop Pepper Company, who has finally created the perfect recipe right here, or recipes, I guess, right here in Austin, Texas. Their all-natural, award-winning hot sauce has a delicious blend of flavor and heat, enhancing your favorite foods and leaving you wanting more.
Whether you like the zesty kick of golden habanero or garlicky smoothness of supreme serrano, it's the best way to spice up your Austin FC pre-match meals or post-match meals, right, Jeremiah? I hear you have an anecdote here.
Yeah, I do. So our friend and sometimes listener, Dallas Teston, texted me yesterday morning to say his very late night tacos that he made at home after watching the game and going out of the town featured some golden habanero, and he thought it was delightful. So if you're making tacos with that and enjoying it, like, let us know about it. Let us know about your teardrop pepper experience.
Teardrop Pepper Company has 2 unique flavors. You can order them from their website, teardroppepperco.com, or from their social media pages. And you can also find them on Sunday, September 12th at the Austin Hot Sauce Festival. They're going to have a booth there. So if you're planning on going to that festival, go by and find Teardrop Pepper Co. and try some of their stuff.
If you order them online, you can use offer code GOAL. You enter that at checkout to save 10% on your order. Put it on everything. They'll make more.
And here's where the tone shifts.
Yeah, so halftime, we ended the stats were 7-1 in shots. Possession was pretty even, 52-48, but Vancouver
But the last 35 minutes I thought Vancouver had a lot of possession early in the first half, and then Austin really controlled it for the majority. So I don't know how you do that math. I mean, but 52 I thought was a bit low for actually how the last, like, at least 25, but really more like 35 minutes had gone, at least from my vantage point.
I think functional possession, it was the higher percent. It was some of Vancouver's possession was a little bit swinging it around the back, like what you see Austin do.
Oh, yes. This seems very familiar all of a sudden. Yeah.
All right. So second half, they bring on David Caicedo, and I believe they play him up top, and he's kind of roaming around and causing danger there. I think Vancouver looked a little more dangerous, but still, like, nothing too crazy at the beginning of the first half. Is that your read on it, Chris?
So this was the biggest thing I was looking for in the rewatch when I watched it back this morning, was because that's how I felt in the moment. And I was wondering if there was something that I've missed or had forgotten. And there were 2 dangerous moments from Vancouver that I think maybe put a little doubt in Josh Wolff's head, or at least made him make the move that he did. And one of them involved David Caicedo coming down the left, and Alex Ring, I don't know if you remember this, he sort of put a tackle in and missed, and then had to put in a second tackle in, and then it was dealt with, and it turned into nothing. And the second one was Ryan Gauld, which, you know, if he had scored on that would have been the goal of the week in MLS, because he tried to catch, and maybe it was a cross, but
it was a cross. It was totally a cross.
I mean, Brad Stuver was lucky to get a finger to that one, and it went off the crossbar and I think out for a corner. But those are the 2 moments that I think led to ultimately the downfall for Austin FC, because they both came from out wide, and Josh Wolff decided he needed some help in those areas. Yeah.
So 60th minute is when Johan Romagna comes on for John Gallagher, I felt like had a decent game at that point. He was just kind of the sacrificial lamb. I don't feel like he was being pulled because he was having a bad game necessarily.
Totally.
And so they moved to a back 3, back 5, depending on the situation, with Romagna on the right, Cascante in the center, Biesler on the left.
Yeah, and that's where I think that we all thought in the moment that it was more of a back 3 situation, but in the post game, and I think that if you watch it back, which I did this morning, is it was a back 5, and he went 5 in the back, and he really tried to sit back and see out a result, which let's get into that a little bit, because I've got some thoughts on that, but I want to kind of hear from you guys first on sort of how you processed what happened the last 30 minutes of the match.
Let's save it for a second, and we'll get into a deeper discussion. But so yeah, Austin goes to the 5 at the back essentially, Vancouver starts building up some pressure, getting more chances. And I feel like the main turning point was Julio Cascante receives a backwards pass, turns and plays a back pass to Brad Stuver and just mishits it and barely touches it. And I think that leads to there's a different chance than the one you're talking about, but leads to a really dangerous situation where Stuver ends up having to make 2 saves in about 5 seconds. That's when I feel like the wheels fell off and Austin FC was no longer anywhere near being in control of this game. I think it was ramping up to that, but in that moment, the game was gone essentially. Like,
and
Austin
that was after Johan came on.
It was 3 minutes after Johan
That's right.
came on.
Okay. I just had to put those pieces together in my head, but yeah. Okay.
Keep going. So this happens, and we're going to get into what we think about that decision from Wolff. But that aside, I feel like there was essentially some bad luck that piled onto that decision that made it a really bad situation for Austin. Mm-hmm. Matt Besler takes a free kick shot to the head not long after that. I think in the 65th minute, somewhere along there. Besler, I noticed in watching, I didn't see it hit him in the head, but I noticed him standing with his hands on his knees. I thought he was just gassed, like he was tired. But then you watch it back, and about the 68th minute, they stop play to pull Besler off of the field. And I think it was Satoshi Ida, who's the head athletic trainer for Austin FC, is talking to Besler on the sideline, and Besler looks kind of defiant. And after about a 5-second conversation, Ida turns and does a little substitution hand signal, like he's got to leave. He can't be on the field anymore. And I don't know if y'all have ever seen this, but in when I was playing high school football, if a guy got a concussion, they would steal his helmet and go hide it from him somewhere because guys would be you're kind of delirious and you're like, oh, I want to be on the field. I'm going to go play. And I've seen guys get concussions and then just sub themselves on to a football game. It's it's A, extremely dangerous, but B, they're not making rational decisions at that point. And I've kind of felt like Besler was in that state of mind at that point, talking to the official, just the look on his face and the way he was talking. But it didn't seem like the trainer needed to talk to him for very long before he was like, oh, okay, yeah, he can't go back in. So Austin FC played down a man for, I thought it was longer than this. It felt longer than this. It was a minute and a half.
Yeah, it was not. It was not very long. But here's the thing, and I'm sure you're going here, but as soon as the goal went in and Freddie Kleeman was already standing on the line, and I think I want to give her credit to the right person, but I don't remember who it was. Somebody tweeted at me something about shouldn't there be a chance to pause or whatever, and it popped in the back of my head. I was like, oh yeah, that was a rule that MLS literally instituted this year for situations like this. And so I think that's where a lot of my focus was post game, was on this moment, because it did change the match. I don't know that it was ultimately what decided the match. I mean, I think that we're going to get into the tactical moves and all that, but I do think that Austin should have had a chance to put Freddie Kleeman in before that happened, of them getting scored on with 10 men. And it's a little bit hard to parse. And I got responses from both Josh Wolff on this and Pro, the professional referees organization, who responded to a question that I put to them. And they sort of said that, Austin didn't ask to stop the game. And this is where I sort of think about, I'll make another American football reference. In college football, I think that there's so many assistant coaches that there's certain guys who have very specific things that they're supposed to be keyed into. Basketball is the same way. I can remember certain coaches being very attuned to how many fouls there were in the game and things like that. I think this is a moment for the Austin FC coaching staff where somebody needed to be attuned to this, to the fact that Matt Besler was getting checked for concussion. And if you got to run out on the field and literally scream at the referee to stop the match, that's what you have to do in that situation, because they should have been able to according to the rules, the way that they're written and the way that I perceived and understood them after the match on Saturday night, Austin should have been able to pause the match while Matt Besler was assessed. And if he was deemed either unfit to go on or needed to be assessed for longer, they should have been able to put in a sub before the match continued. And that didn't happen. And I think from what we received after the match, it was mostly on Austin FC for not realizing the situation that they were dealt in that moment, which it sounds a little harsh, but I do think that those are the things that you're getting paid to do, right? You have to have a coach that's attuned to that. So I thought that was a big moment in the match, and it was a big missed opportunity to have 11 men on the pitch, especially when, there's a guy waiting to come in the moment you get scored on.
And that sub's a free sub too, right? Like it doesn't count against
a free
the 5.
sub.
Yep.
It's a free sub because so if Matt Besler would have been deemed okay to go, then Freddie Kleeman comes back off the field, Matt Besler comes on, and actually the interesting thing about that too is that I guess Vancouver would have an opportunity to make an extra sub as well.
Yeah, they give the other team an extra sub as well.
Yeah.
But your question to Josh Wolff in the post game press conference, that's what I heard from it as well, is that they didn't. It seemed like the Austin FC coaching staff didn't understand that they were allowed to stop the game there. And so the refs didn't get that request. So they're just like, okay, play on. We're going to keep going. So after that, the Vancouver goal, Freddie Kleeman finally comes on. I was honestly thinking like, okay, if Besler comes off, it was like that back 5 setup was already not looking great. Austin FC already looked a little shaky. And I was like, okay, here's a chance to fix it. Let's put on Moussa Djitte for Matt Besler and just go back to 4 at the back. But
that's an interesting thought. Yeah.
Put on because Djitte and Stroud were already warming up. They were standing on the sideline like ready to go about the 65th minute, somewhere around there. And so I was thinking like maybe he'll back out of it and go there. And then again I was thinking, okay, all 3 of those guys are going to come at the same time. But Kleeman comes on and Djitte and Stroud don't come on for another few minutes after that. So I guess maybe they just wanted to reassess after losing that player what they were going to do. But Djitte and Stroud finally come on at the 74th minute, but Sebastian Driussi gets subbed off as well, which I was a little upset about in the moment because Driussi was kind of being the spark of a lot of what Austin FC was doing. And if we want to see the best of what Djitte can do, we need to see Driussi on the field at the same time. But you were able to get, I don't know if it was you that, I think Phil West asked this question in the press conference, but Wolff essentially said that that Driussi was cramping and had asked to be taken off. So that not necessarily a tactical switch or even resting him. He just said like, I'm done.
Which if you've ever played on turf before, even if it's indoor, and again, these guys are better athletes than we are, but I can see being a little bit spent after playing as hard as he did for 75 minutes at that point. But it is unfortunate what you're saying, that you don't get a chance to get all the best players on the field at the same time, which is a bit of that FC Dallas argument that we had earlier on, and we don't need to get back into. But yeah, I mean, eventually we'll see Djitte in with these guys and we'll get to know what that's going to be like, but we didn't get it in this match. And I think that, I'm not sure it would have made a difference in the result, but certainly Austin would have had more firepower to work with going after a winner there.
Yeah, I mean, Austin really did struggle to keep the ball essentially for the rest of the game. I think they had a couple of half chances after that, but didn't really get a lot of like long stretches of useful possession. And I think having Driussi on there would have helped that. But so the next moment I wanted to mention was in the 78th minute. Caicedo gets in behind the back line in transition and tries to chip Stuver as Stuver's like coming out to confront him. Cascante sprints back behind Stuver and clears it off the line. And so I think he kind of owed Stuver one from forcing him to make that double save earlier. So he kind of saved Stuver's bacon there. But a few minutes later, Vancouver scored their second goal. There's a throw in on the far sideline. Romagna sees it and is attacking the ball and just straight up misses it, just whiffs the ball. And so it falls to, I I can't remember who had the ball out there, but it falls to a Vancouver player. They cut it back to the top of the box to Ryan Gauld. He puts a shot on target. Stuver is able to dive over and get a hand to it, but the save shot falls right to Caicedo, and Caicedo buries it. Adrian Healy and Mike LaHood were being a little bit harsh on Brad Stuver for that save. Do you think that's fair? I feel like that is not. If I was going to go after one player there, it's not going to be Brad Stuver.
Yeah, look, I mean, Johan Romagna obviously needs to do better in that moment to stop the Vancouver player from getting past him. But I do think that, you know, if we're gonna praise Stuver for every great play he's made in this season, I do think that if you're watching that back and from a goalkeeper's perspective, I think that for the position that he was in, he made a nice save. I think you want to maybe be a little bit stronger with the wrist of getting it a little further out. But again, I wasn't a goalkeeper, and I'll let goalkeepers and goalkeepers coaches make the final judgment on that. But yeah, I mean, maybe he could have done a little bit better on it, but the whole last 30 minutes is not on Brad Stuver or Johan Romagna, right? Like it's on Josh Wolff. And that's the part I think that we all have to be sort of honest and transparent about, is that these players were not put in a position to win this game because they didn't play to win the game. They played to hold on to the game. Yeah.
So I kind of cut you off earlier to save some discussion for that exact point. And Wolff's reasoning for making that change was that they were getting into wide areas. Watching it back, I feel like making that switch didn't stop them from getting into wide areas, because it was a back five, but the fullbacks, Jimenez and Lima, were pushing up to confront the wingers, and then players are running into the spaces they left behind, leaving Matt Beasler and Johan Romagna one-on-one on the outside, essentially.
That's one part of it. That's one part of it, right? And the other part of it, I think, is where you have to sort of take the good with the bad, and the fact that those two moments that we're talking about with Caicedo and Ryan Gauld that were in wide areas that Josh Wolff was maybe concerned about came after Austin was in promising attacking positions. And this is where I have a hard time with the people that want to change systems. They want to not play the way that Josh Wolff wants to play. And honestly, I think that in this moment, Josh Wolff gave in to that feeling. He gave in to not wanting to play the way that he wants to play. And he talks a lot about being brave, being, taking on those moments when you need to make a play. And in this moment, he, it's do as I say, not as I do. And I think that that's a part where I think we need to see some growth from Josh Wolff, in that if he's going to expect his players to take on teams in this way, then he needs to do it himself. And in this moment, they were close to pinching a second goal that would have put this game away. And yes, maybe they get hit on a counter, but they still have the attacking pieces to go after the game. And when they got hit with that equalizer, they did not have the pieces in place because they were set up in a defensive mode. And as you heard, Sebastian Driussi was waning in his energy. I think if you pinch a goal before the 70th minute when they got scored on, I think that we're having a different conversation, and that Josh Wolff got this game right tactically. And instead he sort of second guessed himself. And I think that is ultimately the first moment where I feel, not that I think that Josh Wolff should be out at the end of the season, because I still think that he's going to make it to the end of the season and even beyond. But I think this is the first moment where this is a coach who made some mistakes that he's got to answer to at this point. And I guess that's my feeling coming out of this Vancouver match, is that if he wants to play this style and he wants to go after games and play offensive, that is, I applaud that. And I think that I've stuck up for him in a number of different scenarios. But in this case, similar to in Kansas City, when we said a similar thing, when Alex Ring went off and the team was playing well, that maybe you don't go to a back five. This was a situation where they had all 11 men on the pitch and they were playing well. They had their throat on the game, and instead he decided to sit back and absorb pressure. And this team does not do well absorbing pressure. That's not the way they were built.
Yeah, I know, Landon, you talked about us not doing a lot with the ball after the 74th minute when Driussi and Cecilio came off, and just looked like we actually only had one shot after that point. It was a 85th minute shot from Pochettino that was not very threatening. And I think, Chris, so you wrote an article about this too, right? Is that your tinkering for the sake of tinkering article?
Yeah, listen, I played a lot of golf.
That?
I played a lot of golf this week. I took my clubs up to Vancouver, and it's one of my vices. And feel how you will about golf. But Josh Wolff, I've heard. I haven't played with him yet or seen his golf game or golf swing, but I've heard that he's a pretty good golfer. I can hack it myself. Okay. And one thing that I've found with good golfers, and I even talked about this plenty on my golf rounds this week, is that we're all sort of masochists and we all like to tinker, right? So, even Tiger Woods, the greatest golfer of our generation, he got to the top of the mountain and he said, I need to change my swing. And I think this was a moment where Josh Wolff got a little bit caught in his own mindset and his own, maybe I shouldn't go this far down this path, but listen, we know that he likes golf. We know that he likes to tinker with lineup decisions. And I think at this moment, he got caught a little bit in seeing one thing that could be fixed and just deciding to go in all in on it instead of seeing the things that are going right and just continuing down that path, which is, I think any golfer can sort of relate to. So yeah, I think, Josh, if you're listening to this, same as I put in the story, if you were reading that, standing invitation to come play at Forest Creek, we'll hash this all out over a couple beers. It'll be all off the record. And, I'd love to see sort of that golf brain at work on the golf course. But I think that the difference between golf and soccer, right? And this is the other thing that I wrote, is that in golf, when you make those mistakes, you tinker with something you shouldn't have, you beat yourself up, you walk away, and you're the only person that's affected by that decision. In this case, there were 10, 11 men on the pitch who were trying to sort of play out this thought that Josh Wolff had of, I need to fix this. And meanwhile, he strayed from the game plan that was delivered to them pregame. So I think that's a little something that I'm going to be watching for going forward, is how these guys respond to him and how he sort of maybe pulls himself back in some of those moments when he sees something that maybe on paper is the fix, but it's harder to implement. It's not like you get a timeout in basketball where you get to get everybody on the same page. Hey, we're changing defenses. You don't get that moment in soccer, right?
Yeah.
You have to, everybody's got to be on the same page instantaneously when you make that switch. And I just didn't see it. Maybe you guys saw something different than I did, but I did not see 11 players that were working on the same page after that Romagna switch. And meanwhile, they were definitely on the same page prior to that. So
I'm definitely not a golfer, but Josh Wolff dresses like he's good at golf, if that makes sense.
He's a white man over 40. I don't know what you want from us. I'm not over 40 yet, but I'm nearing into my 30s and I live in the suburbs. So I think I'm just playing the part at this point, unfortunately.
Did you have any more questions, Jeremiah, before we wrap up?
No, I think I think we can hit on some of the post-game stuff. Specifically, I want to know Chris's opinion on a couple things, I guess. One is, I feel like the people who were sort of on the fence on this whole Wolff in, Wolff out, Wolff whatever thing, like, I feel like this is in the same way that sometimes Landon and I did like 4 weeks in a row where we were like, this is the worst game yet, and this is the worst show yet. But I feel like there's a significant portion of folks who are kind of on the fence or whatever who are like hashtag Wolff out now. Like, do you see that reaction? Do you agree with that? Or, what do you think about what we've seen?
The immediate thing that pops into my head is the Twitter poll that I put out Saturday night. As I was sort of having a conversation with Roma about these very topics, and Roma Desai, the legend, at 22 for 22, she made it up to Vancouver after a couple of different scares with her passport, and not with COVID itself, but with, getting a COVID test in time. But anyway, yeah, maybe the way I framed it sort of was a bit slanted in the fact that, but I do believe this in a certain sense, is that I think that Josh Wolff has a good football mind. And I think that eventually he's going to line that up with being a good leader. Right. And so I think that it's not unreasonable to think that in his third season as a head coach, he might be a successful MLS head coach. And that's sort of what I was proposing. It was a hypothetical of, if in his third season, Josh Wolff's a successful MLS head coach, and you know that now. But next year and the rest of the season are going to continue to be struggles. You don't make the playoffs until year 3. You cut bait, you cut ties, or do you stick it out? And I was surprised. I think it was about 65-35 on the stick it out. So I don't know that people are as negative. I think the people that are vocal are negative, but that's Twitter in general.
I guess there's not many people at this point who are enthusiastically hashtag Wolff in.
Right.
And so there's probably a lot more people thinking like, yeah, like it's not great, but we think he's going to be good one day, or like he's just going to learn from these mistakes and he'll be a good coach eventually. And this is kind of what we signed up for in hiring a first year head coach. But nobody's tweeting that necessarily. It's that you see the vocal angry people. But yeah, I was interested to see that number from that poll you ran to, Chris. But yeah, that's essentially my message to those people, is that like we're angry, but I feel like Austin FC ownership knew that this is what they were getting into, and
to a certain extent, yes, yeah.
I
don't think that anybody, even the most pessimistic Austin FC observer, when they built this roster and they hired Josh Wolff and Claudio Reyna, didn't think that they would be in the spot that they're in right now, right? And so there are some people that need to answer some questions, right? But I don't think that means you need to blow the whole thing up. That's my own opinion, but I followed this
I should have been more specific there. What I'm saying is that with a first year head coach, they're going to make mistakes, and they're going to have some like learning opportunities that they're going to have to move forward from. That's the part that I think that they knew they were signing up for. And so they're like, because they hired a first year head coach, I don't think they're going to then go back and say like, never mind, we're going to fire him now. Like, right. I just don't see that happening unless.
I don't think so.
And I've seen people say that like, oh, he's lost the locker room, these guys aren't fighting for him. And like, until we see actual evidence of that, I'm not going to buy into that narrative. Like, watching a guy, like how a guy holds his shoulders on the field, or like how one guy maybe didn't put in the best effort in a certain game, it's not evidence of losing a locker room or guys not fighting for the team. And I've not seen evidence of like in interviews with players and interviews with the coach, in the way that the players interact with each other, the way they interact with Wolff. I've not seen evidence of that happening. And until we do start seeing that evidence, or it is evident that the team is not trying, they're not even trying to win games anymore. I can't get behind firing Josh Wolff.
I think that's totally fair. One, I think it's a little bit the same as the people who are ready to like throw out the system because we don't have the players for it or whatever, right? Like, we all know what we signed up for, right? We signed up for a guy in a very specific system. We can't 22 games in. No reasonable person is going to like ditch that and try to do anything different. It's the same with changing coaches.
It is a stark contrast, though, to look at Vancouver, right? Because and that was the first question I had for Corey Basso when I met up with him on Thursday morning, was like, well, to explain the Marc Dos Santos thing to me, right? Because this guy's been here for a few years, and they were in the midst of an 8-game unbeaten streak that's now grown to 10 in MLS, and they fired him, right? They let go of Marc Dos Santos, and not that the guy has been, he's had a pretty rough tenure overall. And finally, what the last straw was that I learned and really was hammered home to me by people in Vancouver was that they lost in the Canadian Championship to the local team, Pacific FC, that you just can't do it. And I understand that, right? But I think if this was an established team and you're 2-3 years down the road and you're getting the results in the coaching mistakes that you are right now, I think that it's a different story, and that I think that Josh Wolff would be in dire. He would be worried about having his job going to the Houston match. Let's put it that way.
100% agree.
And this is where I think that some fans get caught up, and even myself, sort of, I start to question a little bit. Well, Josh Wolff said that we're not going to use expansion as an excuse, right? And expansion teams, we've seen expansion teams have success in this league. So why are we holding him to a different standard? And I think that's fair, but I also think that those were naive words that were coming from everybody at the
Yeah.
front end of this season, that expansion was not going to cause problems, and that, the fact that this team had 7 players injured at one point when they don't have an academy and they don't have depth weren't going to make a difference. And this first year head coach coaching a first year team, not having experience with a lot of these guys, especially the guys coming from overseas, all of those things add up. And if you want to blow it up, I get it, but I don't think that you're ultimately going to be in a better spot just because you fire a coach tomorrow than you are today. And so, and I'd probably say that 9 times out of 10 in a situation where, Texas football, for instance, like, I think that everybody's always got a quick trigger, and a lot of times those are acted upon maybe before it is fair, and sometimes they work out. And so I could see from a different ownership group maybe making that move at this moment, but I don't think that this ownership group is going to. And I think that in the end, I still am of the opinion that that'll probably pay dividends for them at some point. Will it be quick enough? We'll find out.
All right, one last question before we wrap up this segment. Moussa Djitte, when do we think he will actually be ready to start a game?
I would like to say against Houston.
You think so?
I mean, what was so remind me, Driussi's debut was against Dallas. He played 30 minutes.
Yeah, something like that.
And then he started the next one.
Yeah, he started the second game. Yeah, he did.
But Driussi came out of preseason.
Correct. And that's the difference. But if we're saying that Djitte is ready for 30, and I thought he looked active, he didn't get a lot of touches on the ball because of the game state, but I don't know. I guess we'll find out. If it's not this week, then I think it'll probably be next week, but they need him, man. They need that number 9. And I think if there's any semblance of data that says that this guy's ready to go, I don't know. If I were the coach, I'd probably be ready to put him in and give him at least 60 from the start rather than 45 from the second half, right? And if he can only go the first 45, then that's fine. But you might as well get him out there with the starters and see what he can do.
Yeah, so Josh Wolff said that he wants to see him in every game for the rest of the season, and Austin FC has 3 games in 7 days.
Yeah, they're about to not have a choice, right? Yeah, because
they're almost gonna,
whether he's ready or not, he's gonna start here.
The other thing is Mackenzie Gaines didn't make the trip, but last I heard from his camp, he's been training in full for a little while, and so I think that we should probably see him soon as well.
Another freaking striker that injures themselves signing the contract.
Yeah, those paper cuts can be brutal.
All right, Chris. I think we can close the Vancouver discussion here. Thanks for joining us. We've been brainstorming things to do for like shows and topics to do for off season and kind of the end of the season. So I think we might want to have you back on for some of those. But yeah, in the meantime, we look forward to reading more of your articles and following the Austin FC journey with you.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been great to get you to know you guys through this, and you guys obviously do great work. And hopefully, everybody that's listening is subscribed to the Striker. But if you're not, check it out. 30 days free, and I think you'll find something a little bit different, even than you get here on Moon Tower. Not to toot my own horn, but I do think that we provide something different, and we're complimentary, not competitive. So
absolutely,
just know that if you support Moon Tower, then you should support the Striker Texas as well.
We would never pretend to do the same kind of work that you do, Chris.
Same here.
All right. Well, thanks, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Chris.
I ain't got no time to let you pass. I only got one life, and it's gone too fast. So I'll
All right. We want to thank Chris one more time for joining us. Jeremiah, let's jump into a quick preview of the upcoming Houston Dynamo game. So I feel like we probably don't need to talk a ton about Houston. We just played them. They are chasing a record, though, that they weren't quite as close to last time we played them, which is I think they've gone 16 games without a win. We just looked it up during the break that the record for MLS was in 1999 by the New York, New Jersey Metro Stars, and it was 19 games without a win. So I'm hoping we can send Houston one step closer to that record. But given how the last few games have gone, I'm not going to have any expectations that that's going to happen.
Yeah, I have no confidence in anything at all. So I believe we would have been the 14th, I think, in a row in that series.
Yes, that seems right.
If I remember that, yeah. So we sit again. If you turn your phone upside down, Texas is doing really, really well in the table. But we sit both on 19 points. But I guess Austin's played one fewer game. Now 6 points behind Dallas in 11th. So we're beginning to separate ourselves from the rest of the league, along with Houston in a bad way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think whoever loses this game, honestly, probably even with the tie, if we tie, I think both teams can definitely not even think about playoffs anymore. That's probably the case now, realistically speaking, but there is still like an outlier's chance of one of these teams winning this game this weekend and then going on a run and getting close to it. But yeah, the loser of this game is almost definitely not going to get anywhere close to the playoff line. As far as players on this team, so you remember they got a red card last time, so I don't know that we can necessarily look forward to only playing against 10 men for a big chunk of the game. But also Maxi Urruti, who I think has been out for a few games now, I think he played in the last 2 games, and so he should be back up top for them, which he's not always consistent, but on his day can be really dangerous. Another player who got some minutes in the last game was Darwin Quintero, who I think he's gotten like 230 minutes this entire season. And he played 41 minutes the other day against Portland. That's the longest stretch in a single game since last November for Darwin Quintero, he's still a DP. Is that right, Jeremiah?
Yeah, he's one of their DPs, and he, before the season started, I think maybe both on the Striker Texas podcast and I think it was one of the shows we had both the Chris's on. We talked about sort of the most dangerous players in Texas and talked about him being maybe like, on a career basis, has one of the most successful careers of anybody playing on a Texas team in MLS, but he has definitely fallen out of favor in Houston with whatever's going on down there.
In that conversation, my reason, like one thing I said about Darwin Quintero was essentially like, in a 45-minute stretch, if you can pick one player who's the most talented player in Texas, I'm going to say Darwin Quintero. But I would not pick him to be on my team because he's shown over the last several years that you can't really rely on him to either show up every time or to get along with the coach or to do whatever, because he fell out with Adrian Heath in Minnesota as well. And so if I were a GM, I would not go anywhere near Darwin Quintero because something's clearly not going right. Maybe it's not all his fault, but there's a pattern at this point. Yeah,
definitely well-established pattern. And so, like you said, you never know what to expect. I'm not going to get my hopes up too much about it. And, Urruti, the thing about him is, he was the one in the preseason match that got everybody exceptionally worried about Julio Cascante, I think.
That was Fafa Pico.
Oh, that was Pico. Okay.
Very fast also.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Right. Wrong
but I think
guy.
Urruti did score against us in that game.
Yeah. I feel like he scored, but yeah, you're right. He wasn't the one that ran down the side and really made Cascante look bad.
Yeah. So there's going to be another sizable group of Austin fans going down to Houston. I think it's probably a couple hundred at this point.
Yeah, it's at least a couple hundred at this point. You can still buy tickets. It's $36 for a ticket just for the game, and then $46 if you want to ride the Austin FC bus down, which I think leaves around noon. It's kind of the same with Dallas. Leaves around noon, go to the match, load back up afterwards. There is a stop at Buc-ee's somewhere at some point, I've heard, and then and come back that night. The difference being this bus is only Austin FC is doing it, and so it's 21 up. But there's free booze on the bus. So go down and do that. I think we've both traveled with Austin FC fans and have had a good time, regardless of how the team does. I'm gonna go down and do this one separately. So I'm gonna take my 12-year-old to the Johnson Space Center that morning, which he's really excited about, and then we're gonna check out some museums and libraries, and then go to the bar and go to the game. So it's a great chance to have a good time with some friends that are Austin FC fans, and also it's probably a pretty good shot that it should be competitive at least. If you're gonna look for a game where you might get a positive outcome, this may be one.
The museums in Houston are great, and I think I'm just realizing that probably my favorite parts of the museums we went to in Houston are also going to be your son's favorite parts of the museums in Houston,
great.
Which is like spaceships and dinosaurs.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the museum we're going to hit for sure. They've got like a natural history museum or something like that. That's going to be
It's
one of us on our list. Yeah.
Like you'll like it as much as he will, and so yeah, highly recommended. All right, so in other Austin FC news, this was the first weekend that UT football had a game on the same day as Austin FC. They were in different cities and at slightly different times, but did we learn anything from that? I don't know that it really means anything until we see them both play in the city at the same time, don't you think?
Yeah, I think I believe September 18th is when they both play in Austin.
Okay.
And maybe even close to the same time. And, so I don't think we did learn anything. I felt like the local media tried really, really hard to make it like a competition and tried to make it, fans, you've got to choose one or the other. And I don't know that there's really that much of an overlap, among the diehards and those fan bases. And I think back to this trip I took to Atlanta like 3 years ago. And they talked about the NFL, because obviously the Falcons and the Atlanta United play in the same building. And at that point in time, what they said was the season ticket holder overlap was like 3% between Atlanta United and the Falcons. Like I would have thought that it would just be like, people love one, they're like sports fans, and so they like this sport. They're going to get tickets for this sport too. But I don't know if it'll be as much of a direct, one or the other thing as people think. I mean, it'll affect me, right? Because we're season ticket holders for both. But I think there's a lot of people that it won't be a big choice. What do you think?
No, I think in the stadium, you will probably not know at either one that there's another game going on. I would imagine maybe on TV that like ratings take a hit there, where there's some people, like if there's not anything else on, they'll watch the Austin FC game. But if the UT game is on at the same time, maybe they would choose that. But there are, like, anecdotally, I can think of a few folks who will be a little bit torn. Derek Ensign, I know he goes to like pretty religiously the UT football games. You go to UT football games pretty regularly, don't you?
Right. Oh, we are season ticket holders for UT. So my parents, I'm pretty sure it's on the 18th. My mom and dad will be going to the UT game, and I'll be going to the Austin FC game.
Now, my friend Ramon, who I meet up at the games with, I think he goes UT football pretty regularly. So there are people, but it's like you said, like the crossover is probably not so big. And then also Austin FC Stadium is just not that big, and there's a really high demand for it. And so there's a ton of people who are very interested in coming to those games that couldn't give two craps about University of Texas.
Well, and it's also, I did look it up. Texas hosts Rice, so hopefully it'll be a blowout if you're a Texas fan. So like if you're in the TV audience, hopefully Texas will have a good lead at halftime. You'll be able to switch it over to Austin FC, even if that's your first choice.
All right, one other little piece of Austin FC news I wanted to cover was that the Academy has started back up. They had their first games over this last weekend. We've talked about this before, but as a reminder, this is kind of a new look for the Austin FC Academy, in that they have two new age groups. So the U17 has been added to the top end, and then the U12 group has been added to the bottom end. And so one notable addition to the new U15 group has the last name Reyna. Joa Reyna, who was playing in the NYCFC Academy last year, and is the son of Claudio Reyna and the brother of Giovanni Reyna. So I was kind of hoping that maybe we would get him into the academy. I've kind of figured maybe they would stay through the end of like their playing season. He has a daughter as well, who I believe is younger than Joa. And I imagine they're finishing school, playing sports, doing whatever. And as soon as that school season was over, they would move them down here and put Joa in our academy. That was a guess up until very recently, but we have confirmation that Joa is in the academy. So here's to hoping that he's anywhere near as good as Gio.
Yeah, that'd be a real find. And they had a good opening weekend, so they played the 13, U13, U14, U15, and U17 all played against Rise, and they all picked up victories. You know, the 17 is interesting because it's getting close to having players who we might see at least train with a big club. You know, I mean, that's one of the things we talked about with Chris Bils about expansion is, you know, not having academy players to call on, but you can see them finally getting a group that's getting closer and closer to being able to provide some amount of cover. And there's as old as the Seattle kids who played against us.
Older in some cases, but yeah, I'm very interested to see what this U17 team looks like, because the kids who were in the Austin FC Academy last season, they'll all be, if we had a U16 team, they would all fall into that category. But there's some new guys that they've brought in from like the Barca Academy here in Austin, some guys from San Antonio FC, which is that's kind of an interesting dynamic there, that they're getting guys from there, and RGV, some other teams, one from Michigan apparently. But like I don't know what age group these guys fall into, and like if they're going to step in and be as good or better than some of the current players, or if they'll take some time to bed in there. But you're right, it's one step closer to seeing these guys step into that first team. I think the reason that it is kind of a blended team, and they won't have played together as much this season, that maybe we wouldn't see any of these newer guys being called in, or maybe a lower chance of seeing some of these new guys getting called into first team training or anything like that. But there's a few guys on that last year's U15 team that are now going to be on the U17 team that maybe would be ready to get looks this year, but definitely a year from now, I think there's a couple of them that could maybe be homegrown signings even and get contracts to play for that first team.
Yeah, it's one more reason why the future is brighter for Austin FC than it is right now, which is probably a good time to end this show, like on a happy-ish and high note.
We'd like to remind you to rate and review, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to continue the soccer conversation, you can find us on Twitter at LViajero87 and JBentley_ATX, and then at Moon Tower Soccer on Twitter and Instagram. You can also go to the Striker Texas website where you can find those articles we were talking about with Chris Bils. There's also some fun stuff from Phil West, and then some other non-MLS specific stuff as well being put up on there. So lots of good content there. Support your local journalists. Thanks so much for listening this week. We'll be back in 1 week with a new episode of Moon Tower Soccer, where we will review the Houston Dynamo match, and then we'll preview the 2 games the following week, which is going to be LAFC on Wednesday and San Jose that weekend. And then we'll cover any other Austin FC news that comes along. Until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.